Hi, my name is Marie. This is Kingdom Life Daily. If you're new, you're welcome. If you're not new, well, welcome back, okay? Okay, so last video that I posted, it's gonna be somewhere on the screen, was my testimony on the Daniel fast. And so today I'm going to go into some tips if you're new to fasting. I think some of these tips might help you with like just any type of fasting in general, but today's gonna be more specific to the Daniel fast because that's like this is a follow-up to the last video. So if you haven't yet, once you finish this video, you can go back and just listen to my testimony and what God did for me on my fast. All right, so let's jump right into it. First thing I want us to understand is that fasting does not change God, right? Fasting does not change God. God is God is who he is no matter what, okay? Our fasting doesn't make him nicer. It doesn't make him more merciful than he already is. It doesn't make him more loving than he already is. He is who he is, right? Fasting, honestly, is mostly for us more than God, right? Everything that we get when we fast are things that were always available to us, right? It could be that maybe that there is some warfare that's happening that, you know, our prayer, our focus on praying and fasting kind of unleashes in the realms of the spirit. But understand that at its core, fasting doesn't change God, right? Whatever God says was for you is for you, right? Maybe just this whole time you've just been distracted and you just never had access to whatever that thing is. But fasting does not change God. And this leads me into the second thing, which is fasting is not a magic pill. Just because you fast does not mean you're automatically gonna get whatever it is that you're fasting for, okay? If like you can't just wake up one day and like, okay, I want to fast for, you know, a house, and then you fast 2 days and automatically you get a house. It doesn't mean God won't do it, but don't put in your mind that it's a magic pill for you to kind of twist God's hands into giving you whatever you want. It's not like that, okay? Our whole Christian walk is about relationship and intimacy. Fasting brings us to that place of intimacy with God, okay? And it just opens our eyes to more and just kind of unclogs our spiritual arteries for us to receive and just kind of deal easier, hear God easier, be more aligned with God. It's not about us getting whatever we want at the snap of a finger, just at the snaps of our fingers, just because we went without food, okay? So it's not a magic pill. There's a king named David in the Bible, right? He gets this woman pregnant. This woman is somebody else's wife. And when the lady gets pregnant, she has the baby, and God gets mad at David. And so David goes into this time of fasting and prayer where basically he didn't eat. He was mourning and crying out for God to kind of spare the life of the child because the child got sick and he knew the child was going to die. God told him like, this child is not going to live as a punishment basically for your sin. You can't keep the child. And so he goes into this time of fasting to try to, I guess, plead with God for God to be merciful to allow the child to live. He did that for days and days, and his people try to come and get him to eat, and he wouldn't. And God didn't answer his prayer favorably. The child ended up dead. And the Bible talks about after that, David got up, washed his face, and cleaned himself up and went to the house of God to worship, right? So David went into his time of fasting and prayer for something, and he didn't receive it, yet he still believed that God was good, that he got up even after the death of his child to go to the house of God and to worship God. So I'm telling that to say that it's not everything that you want that you're going to get. It's not a magic pill. It's not a magic wand that you can just wave and then get God to do whatever you want, okay? If it's not in the will of God, you're not gonna get it, because he loves you that much to give you, to not he loves you enough to not give you something that's gonna hurt you or harm you in the future, okay? Did I say that right? Basically, he loves you too much to just give you whatever you want. Just like if you have children, you just because they come and beg doesn't mean you're gonna give them something that you know is gonna be harmful to them. Does that make sense? Okay. This leads me into the last kind of misconception I want us to clear up, which is that fasting is basically the act of us not eating or not eating what we usually eat or what we want to eat is what's gonna cause us to kind of get an answer quickly from God. It kind of ties into the other two things that I just said. I say that to say this: it's all about the posture of our hearts, okay? It's all about us humbling ourselves. It's all about us coming into alignment with who God is. That's what fasting is. Okay, that's why I was saying earlier that it's not about us trying to get God to do what we want him to do. It's all about us coming to a place of humility, a place of complete dependence on the strength that God gives us from his word, the strength that he gives us from his spirit. From his spirit. It's not about us just getting what we want. It's not about us just starving ourselves. It's about us coming to a place of humility for our relationship with God to just be made sharper and just better overall, okay? For us to get back to that place of BFFs with God. So yeah. That's what I want us to understand. Remember in the last video we read Daniel 10 verse 12, where the angel of God came to Daniel and told Daniel, since the very first day that you started fasting and humbling yourself before God, your prayer was heard. So just one day, right? We talk about the 21-day fast, but the very first day Daniel's answer was released from heaven. He had to continue the fast because the answer did not get to him because of some spiritual warfare that was happening. But again, because his heart was humble, because he decided to humble himself, his answer was released from the very first day. So of all the tips that I'm gonna give you, I just want you to remember that main thing, because I know if you're anything like me, you're very hard. We can be very hard on ourselves when it comes to things like this. And I want you to remember that it's about the posture of your heart, okay? And if you decide that you want to do this, even if you fall short, as long as there's that place of you still have that heart posture of humility before God, he's gonna hear you, okay? And with that being said, I want us to read this. I kind of want to read the whole thing, but it's kind of long, so I'm gonna probably do like maybe a little bit of an in-depth Bible study on another video. But it's Isaiah 58, and if you're going to start fasting, please read that. It's only 14 verses, but I don't want to read the whole thing on here. I'm just gonna read some key verses. But if you are fasting, definitely read Isaiah 58, okay? And basically it's the children of Israel kind of coming to God, right? Well, God is talking to the children of Israel and telling them about how they're fasting and they're doing all of these religious acts, but they're complaining to God that God is not accepting all of their quote-unquote sacrifices, all of their fastings, all of their humility and all of that. And God is basically answering them and telling them why he's not accepting their fast. So I'm gonna be reading just some verses, but again, I'm begging you, if you're really interested and really serious about fasting, read this before you start, okay? I'm gonna read this and then we're gonna get into the tips. So this is Isaiah 58. I'm gonna read verse 2. It says, for day after day they seek me out. They seem eager to know my ways, as if they were a nation that does what is right. This is God talking about the children of Israel, and has not forsaken the commands of its God. They ask me for just decisions and seem eager for God to come near them. Why have we fasted, they say, and you have not seen it? So they're asking God, why have we fasted and you don't see it? You don't see it. It's like we're humbling ourselves, we're sacrificing, we're being religious and spiritual, and you're not seeing it. And God, this is how God is answering them. And we're in verse 3. God says, yet on the day of your fasting, you do as you please. So God tells them that the day that when they decide to fast, they act like they're humbling themselves just by the act of starving themselves, but they are doing as they please. They're not doing what God wants them to do. He says, yet on the day of your fasting, you do as you please and exploit your workers. Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife, and in striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Is this the kind of fast I have chosen, only a day for people to humble themselves? This is God talking. Is it only for bowing one's head like a reed and for lynching in sackcloth and ashes? Because back in those days when they will fast, it would literally be like an act of mourning, like a funeral. They will clothe themselves in sackcloth, which is like basically they wouldn't dress up basically, okay, and they would throw ashes on their head as signs of mourning and things like that before God. So for them, because they're doing these acts, God should be hearing them and answering their prayers. And God is saying, no, even though you're doing these physical acts of mourning and quote unquote humbling yourself, your heart is really not that humble before me. You're doing what you want. You're not paying your workers. You're being spiritual, but your heart is like far from me, is basically what God is saying. And I like that part where he says, is this the fasting I have chosen, only a day for people to humble yourselves? Is it only for bowing your head like a reed and for lynching in sackcloth and ashes? Is that what you call a fast? A day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen? Now God is about to describe the kind of fast that he wants. And he says, to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke. Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter, so to be hospitable? When you see the naked, to clothe them and not turn away from your own flesh and blood. So basically taking care of your family, being generous, being kind. So God is saying this is the kind of fasting that I like. Then your light will break forth. So then this verse 8 going down kind of shows the answer that God will give them as a result of the fasting. So God is saying this is the kind of thing that I call humility, is you basically representing me in being generous and sharing your food, sharing your clothes, being hospitable to the stranger, taking care of those who are suffering injustice. So yes, we humble ourselves and we go without food, to show our humility before God. But remember that it's all about our heart being aligned with God, okay? It's all about us doing God's will and us being righteous, okay? And it's not just the act, right? Because for those of us who have tried to lose weight, we fast. Like we can do intermittent fasting where we go maybe all day without eating and we eat one meal a day, right? That's fasting. But what is the difference between that and a spiritual fast of really trying to humble yourself before God? It is your actions, your heart, okay? So you can't be fasting and over there cussing people out. You can't be fasting and you're over there being mean to people. You can't share like just maybe a simple food. You see a stranger on the road that's asking you for money and you turn them away just because, I don't know, just basically you can't fast and be fighting with people. You can't fast and be rude to people. You can't fast and just be the opposite of who God is. Be generous, be kind. That is the core of a fast. You may fall short in the area of the not eating part, meaning you may like fall in you breaking your fast, but because of you got hungry. But again, the posture of your heart is what it's all about. All right. So again, go read Isaiah 58. It's just 14 verses and it's really gonna bless you, okay? All right, so with all that talking being done, let's jump into the tips, okay?